Welcome to the Blue Lake City Council meeting. Today is June 10th, 2026. Go ahead and please establish a quorum.
The flags in first.
Sorry. Look at leaders, let's stand.
Something didn't feel right.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Staff, would you please establish a quorum?
Mayor Sawatsky.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Scafani. Here. Councilor Napier.
Here.
Councilor Lusso. Here. Here.
All right. Can we get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Motion made by Scafani. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Louis Lusso. All those in favor of approving the agenda as is, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It passes. Moving on to public comment. The public is invited to present petitions, make announcements, or provide other information to the City Council that is relevant to the scope of authority of the City of Blue Lake that is not on the agenda. Do we have any public who would wish to speak today on non-agendized items? Anyone on Zoom? Seeing none. All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Moving on to item number 6. First draft fiscal year 2026-2027 budget. City Manager Stewart, do you want to fill us in on this item?
I will. For green with the part. I'm going to go through this kind of slowly. I don't know if you prefer to ask questions as I go, or if you want me to present everything and then we can ask questions at the end. This is my first budget interaction with you guys. I'd like to see what your preference is.
What is the will of the council?
I'd recommend we let you guide us through it first, the whole way, and then we can double back to questions, especially if you know that there might be some areas you want to deep dive into.
Okay, sounds good. Just so that you know, on the dais and also on the table for the public are a few handouts. Today, when I was going back through the information with some questions that have been posed, it became apparent that the version of the budget that got printed and given to the budget committee is the correct one. And the one that was attached to the memo that then went into the council packet was a previous version. So the pages that you have in front of you are small corrections to that. They do make a pretty significant difference, though, on the net deficit in the general fund, because there was an error in one of the formulas in the streets department specifically. So the things that I have highlighted are the changes that are on those specific pages. The staff report was entirely based upon the correct version. So when you read through the numbers that were in the staff report, they're right. All right. So I assume that you guys have a basic understanding of the funds. I wasn't sure who was going to be here from the public, so I felt like I needed to kind of explain like how the structure of this is set up. So in our general fund, we have a number of departments. They range from 000, which is where we place all of the revenue that is not specifically designated for another purpose. If it doesn't have any restriction on it and it can truly be spent on anything that we want, it goes into department 000. From there, we have the mayor and city council fund, which is 100, a legal fund, which is 160. I'm sorry.
I don't have a staff report.
Oh, really?
And so I wonder if you have anything you want to summarize off the staff report?
I will go over most of the information that's in there as I do the presentation. We have a legal department. The general government department is the place that the majority of the tasks that are associated with City Hall and just the general running of the city itself, that's where they sit. 200 is specialized for planning and 240 is for building. 260 is where law enforcement goes. That's where we put the expenses associated with the sheriff's contract and the offsetting transfer that comes from the SELF. It's also where we place the retirement unfunded liability payment that we make and the offsetting revenue from the Prop 172 funds. And so those, I'll go into that department together because they can only be used for public safety. Then we have animal control. We have public works streets, which is Department 320. We have 425 and 445, which are parks and facilities and recreation. And then 900 is where our capital outlays sit that are not specifically related to the water or sewer fund. If they're water sewer related, they go into those specific enterprise funds. Then we have a number of special funds. Right now, they range from fund number 11 to 44. That varies over time, depending on which funds we're using for special projects or if we have a specific thing that's going on. The enterprise funds are Fund 60 through 72. That includes both water and sewer. In each one of them, there's multiple funds, and the revenues from each of those funds cannot be used in the other funds. So, for instance, the interest that's associated with capital reserves cannot be spent on operations, for example. And then the last group of funds are the trust and reserve funds. And this is where we put things where we have some sort of fiduciary responsibility to the employees to have a balance in there because of some sort of a benefit that they've been promised. Or Fund 90 is specifically where we put all of our assets that are not enterprise assets. So all the land, all the buildings, everything that's associated with the general workings of the city are in Fund 90. And so that, of course, is where the majority of the depreciation also sits. All right, next slide. So currently for special funds, we set up Fund 15 for the Bike and Skate Park Fund. 25, 30, 31, and 34 are all related to streets and transportation items. And so they've kind of been grouped together in this presentation. We collect money from the gas taxes, we collect money from the Regional Surface Transportation Program, and all those funds get transferred into Department 320 to offset expenses that are in there, with the exception of a match that we have this in the amount of $4,200. So our street fund can never be anything other than a deficit of at least $4,200 every year. Then we have Fund 32, which is solid waste and recycling. We have 33, which is for law enforcement. And then 36 is our Powder Creek District, used to be called the Industrial Park. There's a number of departments underneath that where we keep track of whether it's an immediate thing or if it's an expansion project. And then Fund 38, 42, and 44 are all related to CDBG. Fund 44 is where the federal portion of the CDBG program sits. And as long as the interest and any loan repayments that we receive in any given fiscal year are less than $35,000 amongst all of three of those funds, then we get to transfer all of that money into Fund 38, which then becomes available for the city to use at their discretion. If it's more than $35,000, let's say somebody passed away and their house had to be sold, and so then they had to pay the loan that they have from CDBG with us, and the amount was more than $35,000, then that amount would remain federal, and we would have to keep it in Fund 44, and those funds would be restricted to the regulations for CDBG. Okay, next one. Yeah, I have notes down here, that's why. So in the Water Enterprise Fund, there's 4 different funds that sit in there. Water operations is where almost all of the expenses go. It's also where our normal fees that we collect on a monthly basis from our customers are. The water connection fee is just that. It's only for when we have a new connection. We have a specific portion of the fee that's not administrative that goes into there. The idea is that you put the money in there, and then when you need to do some sort of a expansion of your facility, you use those water connection fees for that, because they're basically buying into the idea that you already have a working system that they didn't pay anything for yet. And then the Water Capital Reserve Fund is a place where we put money with the idea that it's for capital improvement projects. And there's certain criteria, of course. It can't be maintenance, it can't be operations, but if we were to go out and rebuild a pump station, for example, even though the pump itself, if we were to just replace one at a time, it wouldn't necessarily be a capital project, but if we replace the entire pump station, then it would fall into that category. So that's where the money sits for bigger projects that we're looking for. It would be the places we'd look for match for things like the water tank replacement project. And then the last one is Fund 64. The Turbidity Reduction Facility Reserve Fund is just a pass-through. The idea is that the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District has a fee that they charge to the city and to every customer that they have that buys water from them. And that fee is then passed through to our customers. It was one of the things that you guys recently changed, because when I got here, I realized that what we were collecting was significantly less than what we were paying. So there was no pass-through to it. But this year's budget shows a net zero because we should collect about the same amount as what we have to pay to Humboldt Bay. So that's the entirety of the water enterprise funds. For sewer enterprise, we only have 3 funds. We have operations, which is really similar to our water operations fund. Connection fee, same thing. Capital reserve, same thing. They're very similar. There is no crossover. You can't spend money that is in Fund 72 for operations. You can't transfer money. If you were to want to like borrow money out of Fund 72, for example, to do a water project, you'd have to set up like a full-blown loan agreement and have the repayment terms and what interest rate you'd be paying from one fund to another, because they really are standalone cost centers that are supposed to be treated like a business. Okay, and then the very last ones are our little trust reserve funds. These generally don't even show up on your financial statements because of the fact that they're almost all asset and liability accounts. There's not a lot of revenue that comes into them. 90 ends up showing up on your profit and loss statement or your revenue expense statement because of the depreciation. But the rest of them, the income for dental vision trust is paid for through operations funds, and then the expenses are paid directly to the employees as they do a request for a reimbursement on an eligible expense. 82 and 84 are both related to our insurance and our retirements, and 84 has quite a lot of money in it because that's where the PERS liability sits for the retirement reserve account that we pay off a little bit of each year. Okay, so the first graph I put together was just, and maybe, Emily, would you do me a favor and turn off the lights for us so it's a little bit easier to see these? I tried to make them black in hopes that they would show up better, but I don't know if it worked or not. So what I wanted you guys to kind of have a feel for is as revenues go, where do they actually come from? And so you can see the really light blue amount is the general fund, and it totals $960,000 roughly. So the vast majority of all of the revenue that we bring in is a general fund revenue. The sewer fund is $606,000, and the water fund is, I can't even see it on my own. Good night.
Can you tell us what colors we're talking about so we can kind of
Yeah.
match it?
See, I wanted to run this where I could run the mouse. Okay, I'll run your mouse. Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's okay. All right. So here's general fund right here, $959,000 in change. This one is your sewer fund, that's orange right here, $606,000. Here's your water fund, that's the darker blue, it's $664,000. And then Powers Creek has $27,000. That is only rent. Law enforcement is $201,000, and that's the sum of the SCLF and the Prop 172 revenue streams. CDBG is $10,000. This is almost entirely interest on the loans and or funds that we have sitting in those special funds. For transportation funds, we bring in $132,490. Special funds are $25,600. So all of the ones that are down here, everything except for this light blue, this right here, has to only be spent on things that it was brought in for. So it really limits what your options are for offsetting your expenses in the general fund, because way more than half of your revenue is restricted, which is good and bad, I guess. It does create some opportunities when it comes to needing to increase revenues in some of these enterprise funds because you have control over those as opposed to the general funds, which are mainly taxes that are quite a bit more difficult to modify. Okay. Okay, so here are the actual types of revenues that you get in your general fund. Motor vehicle in lieu is a relatively new program that took the place of some of the property tax funds. The other revenue are teeny tiny things. What is this one down here say? Can you, oh yeah, that's property taxes. So this is one of your big funding sources. It's fairly stable. One of the things that I didn't do in this budget that I think I probably will do in the last one is the county sent us some information after your packet had gone out as to what the payment was for the second half of the year and what the estimated increase kind of was going to be for next year. And so it looks like because of their 2% inflation factor that they apply to all of them, that we probably should include that 2% in ours as well. And that has not happened yet. I basically used an even number from last year. These are our recreation fees of $107,000. This $80,000, this is a one-time revenue stream. This is a reimbursement that we're going to get from the state parks per capita for Town Square. That's an estimate of what that actually is gonna be. It might be slightly more than that. But these are for things that you've already paid for, so it's not exactly a revenue stream. And then here's your rent for park facilities themselves at just over 40,000. We're bringing in about $175,000 in sales tax. I am hopeful that that will go up some this year with the new restaurant that's down at the brewery. It seems like they're doing quite a bit of business, and so that might be higher than estimated. But again, I used a rounded version of last year's number and wasn't too liberal with possible increases. Animal licensing and fees is $3,000, helps offset our cost for the Humboldt County contract. And TOT, Samantha is working very hard at starting to collect this. This is something that's kind of been ignored for the last few years in the absence of a full-time city clerk, is making sure that this gets collected. And so this might end up being bigger than estimated. Our building permit fees, I estimated at 26,000, and that's based on the increase that I plan to bring before you for adoption. Your building permit fees have not been updated for like 12 years. And so Dan and I have been working on putting together what those should be and how we're going to format that information. And it'll come to you hopefully with a effective date of like August 1st. So that has been built into this number here. Our business licenses and taxes at 19,000 is pretty much what they've always been. We have no change in what that fee is. Cost recovery fees and charges. I estimated this a little bit lower this year than I have in the past, than they have in the past, mainly because we're having problems with getting people to actually pay it. We get a lot of pushback on every invoice we send out that has cost recovery. And so I don't want to overstate what that is going to be. That's about $5,000 less than what they budgeted last year. Our franchise fees seem to be fairly stable. This is again a rounded number of what last year's was. Our interest, unless the interest rate drastically changes, the interest that we get on our LAIF account is pretty good and it seems to be pretty consistent. And so I'm expecting that to be a good estimate. And we're back to the beginning. So any questions on revenue streams in the general fund? Yes, Kat.
Sorry. On the cost recovery fees, what is the nature of that cost recovery?
So it's anything planning, engineering, it's the administrative fees, it's everything associated with us doing like conditional use permits or reviews of planning permits, or it's those sorts of things. It doesn't include the building permit fees, and it also doesn't include any cost recovery for recreation.
And is that gonna go up potentially because you're gonna be start implementing a deposit model for that?
I would hope so. And you guys did approve increased deposits for those to try to help offset that. Part of what really needed to happen that wasn't is we were even under our existing code. The city manager was required to provide an estimate, and then they paid a deposit. And then when that deposit got used, they were supposed to provide a new estimate, and that just didn't happen. And so then you started incurring fees from SHN and other people, and the customers didn't know that. And so then when they would get a bill, they'd be like, what the heck? I didn't authorize this. If you had told me this, I would have done something different. So we're going to eliminate that process where it truly is you pay a deposit. When you get to the end of it, we have a discussion about why it is that your project's not done. And then you make an additional deposit based on a new estimate. So that we aren't in arrears all the time with them.
Michelle had a question, then I will, and then Terry, if you have one.
I am forgetting what TOT is.
Oh, it's the transient occupancy tax.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, of course.
Short-term rentals mainly here.
Gotcha.
The cost center methodology, is that like a governmental accounting? Is that a law or is that something we've adopted for ourselves?
The enterprise funds are law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other? Okay. All right, next slide. What should I put next? So I made some tables in here of what these actually are so that you can kind of see the percentages. One of the things I thought might be helpful is to see the differences between last year and this year and how much they are. I use that $239,000. That's interesting. So each one of these is going to match with what you just saw on the pie chart. And these are the same numbers that are in your packet. Okay, so these are the revenue streams from the special funds themselves. And you can see they're pretty stable. The things that are varying here, that you see big amounts, where's that little mouse? Okay, so right here, all these that I put reimbursement in front of, these are specific reimbursement for expenses, and they are very project specific. They're one time. And so that's why you have big amounts that are negative and that this year's budgets are zero on this. The HCOG transportation tax for streets, I think what happened is, I don't think Jill understood what had happened the previous year on an error that got made on the reimbursement request. And so she used the duplicate of the prior year's number and put it in here. But that error was a one-time thing. And so the amount that's shown in here of 27,000, that's pretty much what it is every single year. The way that HCOG's money works for this is you get $40,900 and something dollars, and you have to pay your transportation costs first. And then once you've paid that cost, that we currently have a contract with HTA or somebody like them. Once you pay that first, then you can use whatever's left over for streets. But the goal is transportation. And so 2 years ago, there was some sort of a snafu, and $3,000 was all that got charged for transportation. So then there was this huge amount for streets. So this is just an error. It's not actually a change in how this program is working. Oh, I see what I have going on your screen. Okay, and these are the water and sewer revenue streams. So you can see we have, the top line is Cal OES's water tank reimbursement, and we did receive that this year. I have put nothing in there for fiscal year 26-27, and that's true with every capital projects. I have included none of them in this budget. I felt like it was important for the council to see what your budget looks like without those things in them first. And then as we approve a project, I would like to see you guys make a modification to your budget for the amounts for the CIPs themselves. So there's no expense or revenue stream for the water tank project in here. You can see there's a big change in the water fees charges. And what that includes is there's a small increase that was part of the already adopted fee increase schedule. But what I have found since I got here is that the amount that we are charging per 100 cubic feet of water is less than what we pay for it. And which obviously is not a good business plan and we need to remedy. So what I'd like to do is do a cost of services analysis and bring that before the council and ask for you guys to modify that one fee that's in your existing fee structure so that that becomes more of a pass through. So what we'll use is the cost of the water that we pay for Humboldt Bay Municipal Water plus what it costs to pump it. And then all the rest of the expenses have already been applied to the base rates. But the increase that you see in here is $50,000 roughly, and that's a change from $1.90 per cubic foot or per 100 cubic feet to $3.25 per 100 cubic feet. The rate study that was completed and was put before you included an increase for every fiscal year based on the fact that they knew the costs were going to increase. But when the Prop 218 notice went out, it was excluded. And so then when the rates were adopted, it was also excluded. So you've been charging the same amount for the last 4 or 5 years because that did not get picked up in the process. So we need to remedy that. And at a minimum, we need to bring it up to an amount that's equal to what you're paying. Probably even better would be to consider trying to recoup what we didn't collect in the last 3 years that should have been collected. But we also need to look at what can your ratepayers afford? And so that'll be a whole nother discussion that'll come before you. But the assumption is in this number is that we do implement a increase to $3.25 to at least cover your bare bones of what it's costing you every single year to bring water. The interest earned, pretty stable. Other water revenue, it varies a little from year to year. The majority of that is a contract that we have with the Fieldbrook Glendale Water Services and Sewer Services District, where we go out and do certain work for them, and they pay us $1,000 a month. And then if we have to go out on an emergency, we pay them. We charge them, and then they pay us, kind of as a mutual aid type thing. And then the TRF, of course, has increased because of the rate you already adopted. For the sewer, the revenue is significantly lower. And the reason that is because Historically, the Rancheria was charged for their sewer services based on how much water was delivered through their meter. And that's how all of our customers are dealt with that are commercial. The difference for the Rancheria is that they have a number of facilities where they were required to install a leach field system because of the type of sewage that they were collecting. For example, the gas station is that way because they have an RV park that's connected to it, and the formaldehyde that comes out of RVs would kill the little bugs in our ponds that are part of the cleaning process for us. And so that entire section of their facility has a leach field system. They also had one that already pre-existed in the middle of their property that where the old tribal office used to be. And so over the years, there's been quite a bit of water that's actually gone into leach field systems that we've been billing them for. But because we had no way of knowing what it was, that we didn't really have another choice. And so about 8 or 10 months ago, they installed a metering manhole that's got an effluent meter in it. And we've gone through the process of calibrating that, making sure that the amount that it's showing as the actual effluent that's being collected by our system is accurate. And so now we're billing them on that. That is a lot less than what we were previously billing them. And that decrease is pretty much entirely based on that. Also included in here is the small increase that's already planned for a rate increase for next year. So you can see the total for all the funds is 1,890 less this year than it is last year. That is pretty much entirely made up of the CIP reimbursements. So when I took all of those and I added them up, that actually may be the next slide, I don't know. Yeah. You can see that the water tank, the pedestrian bridge, and the truck route are 186,000. So basically your revenue this year overall is approximately the same as it was last year with all those minor variations. That is really weird not to be able to see the top of that, because that's what the title is. Okay. So then I looked at, okay, so you bring in all of this revenue for the general fund. Which of your departments are actually using the majority of this? So you can see that over half of it is being used by your general government, 404,000. Planning this year is using 86,000 of it. Building almost breaks even. Law enforcement almost breaks even. Animal control costs us a little bit. Our public works street, that's pretty much our matching amount that I was telling you about that we always have to spend. Parks is 155,000 and recreation is 105,000. We have a little bit in mayor and city council, which mainly this year is related to the AV system that we would like to install in here. There's $5,000 sitting in that number to be able to do something similar to what we have in here tonight. And this year for legal, there's a pretty significant draw, and a lot of that is related to the number of lawsuits or potential lawsuits that we have currently seen come before us. And so I didn't want to be overly optimistic about how much we're going to end up spending in legal. All right. Yes.
Thank you. Is that okay, Mayor?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Have that power?
So, just to be clear, like for park facilities and for recreation, those numbers are the difference between what was planned for revenue and, expenditures.
Correct.
Plus or minus.
That's how much it's drawing out of Department 000, above and beyond what it brings in for revenue.
Is there any other questions at this point? I have a question and kind of a statement. We were under budgeting our legal before, is that correct? Generally?
I'd have to look at the 8-year comparison. I did an 8-year comparison to kind of get a feel for where the trends were. You guys didn't pay a whole lot in legal until about 2 years ago.
Okay.
And then it has drastically gone up since then.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Maybe if we had paid.
Next slide. Yeah, next slide. Okay, so here is how your water expenses are distributed. The vast majority, half roughly, is salary, wages, and benefits. And these are the people who do the work, not only the Public Works Department, but also the people in City Hall itself that do all of the billing and all of the collections of funds and all of the posting. This is truly everything that's water related. Here's our gas and electric costs, is $25,000 a year. This is, the majority of this is for the pumps that are at the Glendale pump station. Our water is $227,000. That's what we pay to Humboldt Bay Municipal Water to be able to get the water. Communications, lab tests, these are all relatively small amounts. You can see insurance is $25,000, which is a significant increase this year from last year. The policy that we have with Sarah went up almost $19,000 this year on liability alone. And so that, of course, gets split out amongst general government and water and sewer. And so you're seeing the portion of it sewer related, right, or water related right here. What's that? Do you need this? I don't know why. I don't know. It shows up sometimes and not other times. Repairs and maintenance is the work that it takes to take care of the equipment and also the vehicles that we use to be able to take care of the water system. Supplies are chemical supplies and things of that nature, postage services, and then consultants include everybody who does work out there. So when we have an audit, it gets split between general government and water and sewer. When we have actuarial consultant do something, it gets split. Every single consultant that does a piece of work that affects all of the city gets divided out into all these different departments. And so this is the portion that gets allocated to the water fund, is the $40,000. That also includes things like planning or engineering fees that are specific to the water fund. So if I need Mike Veach to go out and do some sort of work on sizing something or designing something, then he would bill it directly to this department, to this fund. One of the things that I included in here this year is $10,000 to have SHN take the construction plans that they prepared for the tank replacements and split it out into two pieces. We had originally thought that was going to be a project where we're going to be able to afford to do both tanks together, but it's become really evident as the project has languished and inflation is extremely high that only one of those tanks is going to be viable for the amount of money we have. And the funding sources generally will not pay you to have a consultant modify the engineering they've already done. So I went ahead and just included $10,000 to have them split those out. It's just a matter of taking all the plan sheets and creating two packages out of them. So it should be way more than enough, but that is why that one's slightly more than it was last year. So any questions about water expenses?
Any questions?
Okay,
Fun.
it's easier to ask as we go.
Yeah.
All right, so sewer is far more labor intensive. We actually run a sewer treatment plant. We don't run a water treatment plant like a lot of agencies do. We just buy our water. And so that's why you're seeing such a huge change in this particular pie chart as to how much is salary, wages, and benefits. We have one person who works at the Public Works Department that is a certified wastewater operator, and he spends the majority of his day out there running the plant, taking care of the plant, adjusting the chemicals, adjusting the weirs. I mean, it's just an ongoing, constant process for him. Again, we have consultants in here, services, postage, supplies. At the wastewater plant, we have a very expensive license that we have to get every year from the state. And that's why this one is almost $47,000. Is a little over 40 of that is actually the license itself from the State Water Board. Again, insurance has gone up. It's approximately the same amount as it is in the water. We do a lot more testing in the sewer program because we have an outfall that we have to test for weekly. And so the lab tests are quite a bit more expensive. And then again, we have gas and electric. Now, the gas and electric is more expensive here than it is in some other places because instead of paying for chemicals, we actually have a chlorine generation system down there that is powered by electricity. And so we take salt and water and we can create chlorine out of that, or sodium dichloride, to be able to treat the effluent as it leaves the sewer treatment plant before it goes into the percolation basins and ultimately back into the river. So that's why that number is as big as it is. We have seen, I do not have a lot of increase in that price. We have seen some economies of scale as they have attempted to try to modify the operational times that the chlorine generation unit runs on off-peak as opposed to peak hours. It's not necessarily something that has to run while somebody's there to supervise it. And so we have worked on maybe adding some timing features and just honestly just giving some consideration to it when you make the choice to tell it to turn on. So those are the sewer expenses. Is there any questions about those?
None.
All right, moving on. What else do we have? Okay, so we have some expenses that are not cash expenses, and you'll notice that the totals that were in the detailed pages don't match perfectly with what's on your summary sheet. And that's because on the summary sheet, that is a cash flow basis summary sheet to give you a feel for revenues and expenditures on a cash basis. we have depreciation, which is not a cash expense, but also we have this JSB 64 adjustment, and it's done every year at the end of the year, and it's for retirement. And it shows up in the water and sewer expense line items, even though it's not a cash payment. It's actually posted against a liability. And 2 years later, CalPERS then invoices us for the amount of that liability, and we pay it in cash. So that's kind of what the next slide is there are some cash outflows that do not show up on your expense statement either. Now, normally debt service would be one of those things, but the city paid off all of the loans that they had this last year. And so there is no debt service payments this year at all for the city. The only cash outflow that's not shown as an expense in the detailed pages is the one to CalPERS for the unfunded retirement liability. And I'm going to explain to you on one of these other slides what was wrong with the assumption that I made in the version you were given. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about staffing. This is my proposed organizational chart. There are some changes from the one that you approved, I don't know, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, whenever it was that we changed our 30-hour-a-week person to a full-time admin accounting specialist, which is sitting right here. So we now have 2 full-time admin accounting specialists, and we have one that is part-time. This used to be an office assistant position, and it has a pretty different position description than the accounting specialist does, but the pay scale is not hugely different. It's like $1 or $2 an hour difference. And so as Carrie and I have worked through, like, how is the business and finance department going to work, and what skills do we need, and how do we need to separate out the tasks? We felt like that position would be more useful to the city if it was just had a little higher level of skills. And we had somebody who could do some of the accounting. It wasn't just a secretary. And so we're proposing to change this year from that office assistant. There it is. From this being an office assistant position to this being an actual accounting specialist. We're still showing it as part-time as it was before, but we just want a little higher caliber person. Then in law enforcement, that's entirely covered by contract. All of these that are gray are contract services. They're not employees. In public works, we still have public works superintendent, and then this is our supervising wastewater operator. He's the one I was saying spends most of his time out at the wastewater plant. We have a water operator that is recently licensed in the last 8 months. And then we have 2 maintenance workers, and one's a full-time person and one's a part-time person. There's no change in that from what you adopted last year. In Parks and Recreation, we have a Parks and Recreation director, and an assistant director, and then we have a whole group of people who are the skate staff. And they're all classified as recreational specialists 1 and 2. They're all part-time. They all work different days depending on how many skate parties we have. There was a position in here that was a half-time position on the org chart called a recreational coordinator. And that position was filled in January when you guys adopted your number of FTEs, but that position was given a 0. So the different documents associated with what was adopted for the 25-26 budget don't match with each other. It's not currently filled and it's not currently budgeted for. So I didn't include it on the organizational chart, but I think Emily would like to keep that position, at least as a possibility in the future. And maybe we just come back and add it when we're actually ready to fill it. And then in land use, that department is entirely covered by people who are part-time. Our building official works for us as an employee. He only works 10 hours a week. The city engineer and the city planner are both contract services. And then up in the upper area, we have the city manager, who's also the public works director, and the city clerk. And then our city attorney and our city accountant are all on there. So any questions about org chart? Because this org chart is how all of the expenses related to staffing are in the budget. All right.
Is there any difference at all between the revised one and the new current one?
The only change was in the streets department,
Okay.
and it was just an addition error in the sheet.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so here are the FTEs. You can see in 24-25 and 25-26, in administration, we had 0.9, and then we had 1.0 with the addition of a city clerk as a full-time job, and we're proposing the same for this year. In finance, we went from 3 to 3.5 this year. It's it's the part-time person that you already approved to add to the other part-time person that existed. And then in Public Works, exactly the same, and in Parks and Recreation, the only difference is the recreational coordinator. Emily did say that for the recreational specialists 1 and 2s, that she's gone from 1.25 to 1.0 because we're not doing the summer recreation program. And I know in 24-25 to 25-26, they had also gone down for a quarter because they didn't plan to do it this year. And so the last half of this fiscal year would have fallen into that. And so you can see that basically an entire half a position is gone out of the recreational specialist because of the summer rec program. Right. Okay. Okay, so this is our existing salary schedule. I am sorry this is so small. In the next one, I'll just include it. It actually is an 11 by 17 piece of paper. This is what it looks like with absolutely no changes to the wages in here. The only thing that we have done in this one is in the old one, Public Works Maintenance 1 and 2, Recreational Specialists 1 and 2, and Admin Account Specialists 1 and 2 were shown on a single line. And so there was no obvious way in the combination between that and then the position descriptions, as somebody met the qualifications for the next level, you couldn't like promote them because there was no thing to promote them to. So what we did is we went through, we split it out, and we took what that position made at level 3 and made that the starting level 1 for the promoted position. So that, but what that creates, of course, is 2 additional levels at the very end of each one of those level 2 positions. Does that make sense to you?
And just to confirm, we just approved this a modification to this a couple months ago, or?
It was, so you adopted your salary schedule in January.
Okay,
And no changes have been made to that since then.
okay,
Yeah, we just changed the number of positions that were being filled.
got it.
Yeah. So this is what it would look like if we just went ahead and structured it so that there was a 1 and a 2 for each different level. The next one, what it includes is this is what it looks like if we add the 2.3% COLA that I am recommending. We have seen a significant, to the tune of $50,000 decrease in the cost for health insurance with the modifications that we've made and the switching over to CalPERS. And so part of the hope in that was that we could then take some of that and return it back to our employees in terms of wages to offset the fact that they were paying for an additional portion of their insurance. Part of my goal was to try to make it to where every employee that works here gets equal access to benefits, and that some employees don't get a much more valuable benefit package because they have a bigger family, that we needed to equalize that sum. And so that's what this does, is it makes it to where there's a cap on what the city pays, but we can offset that by offering slightly higher wages, and that would be a benefit to everybody. The net of that, the savings for the health insurance and the increase in the 2.3% COLA is still a $27,000 savings to the city. So. Oh, the other thing I corrected on this, here, let's go back one. So I don't know why Jill put the city manager on there last year the way that she did. She just put as level 1 what the city offered me, but it matched not at all with what you guys had put in your solicitation. So I went back and corrected it. There was no way to make it pretty for 13 levels. It fit into 11 levels best, with the range from the low to the high of 104,000 to 124,800. So that's the way I've shown it on here, that there is no level 12 or 13. And that's the case on both of them. All of our contract positions, so myself and the building official, they don't have a COLA applied to them. It's only been applied to the employees that are hourly and don't have a contract with us. Trying to make it do. All right. So here's the total on your staffing costs by department. You can see that most of these have gone down. And like I said, it's basically $28,000 less than it was last year, even with the 2.3%. Oops, that's a period, not a slash. The 2.3% COLA being applied. And so you can kind of see by department how your wages are split. And I think there's actually probably a pie chart that matches this. That's probably the next thing. Yeah. So that's all your staffing costs, and that's the portion of the pie that they each take up. Of course, water and sewer just slightly more than half. Recreation and general government are about even. Parks is 10%. Powers Creek is very little. We do some maintenance out there to make sure that the properties that we own in that district stay up to snuff. Streets is small. Building and planning are almost nothing. So this is City Hall itself. And part of what I wasn't sure if you guys understood is how wages move through the budget itself. So the City Hall staff includes myself and Samantha and everybody that's in the finance department. And
Make that larger, please.
yes.
If I can. Hold on.
Yeah, thank you.
It's only
So-
one entire.
Yeah, city staff. So sewer is 32% and water is 32%. And then we don't charge anything to recreation, but we charge to parks and facilities. And then there's a small amount that gets charged to building because we process all of the payments and all of the things associated with that. Same thing with planning. There's a coordinating that goes on with that. And then general government picks up the rest of it. And that's where the wages for things like business licenses and answering the phone and all of the things that are not specific to one of these other areas end up landing. So any questions about how City Hall gets divvied up? Part of what I want you to notice is that City Hall does charge to departments that you wouldn't necessarily think of because we run everything for those departments on an administrative level and a financial level. So this is public works staff. So they spend about 65% of their time doing water and sewer. And then they have very little general government. That general government that's in there is associated with them. They come and they empty our trash and they do a bunch of things at the actual city hall. But that's all that 1% is assistance to us. Streets is 16% and then parks is 13%. They don't charge anything to recreation because they're not involved in the recreation program, but they do a lot of work on maintaining the facilities of the city. And park facilities makes it sound like they're only like Orange Field and the things over there, but it's not. When they come and they mow the grass outside of City Hall, that's where it gets posted is into the facilities account. And those designations have been in place for a long time, that's considered a facility. Anything that's not inside the actual walls of City Hall doesn't get billed to City Hall.
Jenny, quick question on the time card, so someone comes in and takes out the trash, or they put 5 minutes of general government on their time card then?
What they do is there's a designation, we have distribution codes. And so if he spends an hour doing trash, we have a distribution code associated with that. And we've kind of estimated, okay, he spends this much time at City Hall and this much time at Trash Hall, and he did this and this and this. And so it's ratioed out by percentage. And so City Hall gets a percentage of that. He doesn't count the actual minutes it takes him to enter,
I just didn't know how granular we're getting on that.
Yeah, it's I feel like it's granular enough. I mean, he doesn't mix it with the rest of the time that he's doing other things that day. It's not up at that level. It's just once a week he goes around and does trash. And so you end up with 2 hours on his time card for that, for the whole city.
Thank you.
Okay, and so then Parks and Recreation by department. So 29% goes into skating, which is one of their bigger revenue streams. Parks Facilities gets 24% and Recreation itself is 47%. And then part of what I thought might be helpful for you to see, because I know there's been a lot of discussion about where can we cut and should we just cut out Parks and Recreation? So I wanted you to understand how many other departments are charging into here. This is not just Emily and her staff that are charging into Parks and Recreation. You can see, this big blue part is the Parks and Rec staff itself that charges into recreation. And here's the Parks and Rec staff that charges into parks. But the other quarter of this is Public Works and City Hall that charges to recreation and City Hall that charges to parks. And so even if you were to delete both of these departments, you'd have to then absorb that 25% into your other departments in some fashion.
So are you saying Parks and Recreation Are you combining facilities and recreation in this line?
Yeah, this is both. Yeah. So we wanted to give just a little bit of input on historical trends for recreation costs, and Emily is here if you want to delve into this a little bit deeper. She helped prepare this information, and I'll tell you what's on the slides, and then if you have questions, I'm gonna sort of answer them. So just kind of as a comparison from, we were looking at an 8-year period, just kind of see like what's happened over the last 8 years. And so one of the factors that you should keep in mind is, minimum wage increased from 10.50 to 16.50 during those 8 years. And that affects a big portion of her staff because all of the skating staff and all of the staff associated with helping with the summer recreation program are basically down at this minimum wage level. Also worth noting is in 2020 to 2021 and 21 to 22, a pretty significant portion of the employment costs were covered by the funding from COVID. And there was a fund that was set up for that, and those were actually posted into there. And so they haven't been blended into the other wages that are in the Parks and Rec department. It makes it much easier to see how things have happened over the last 8 years. And also worth noting is that the revenues that they bring in for recreation pretty much every year exceed the cost for staffing. It's just all the rest of the expenses that we end up pulling from other places. And I'm only saying the staffing, this Parks and Rec staffing, that doesn't include the 25% that's from other departments. And so this is a graph that I made of all the different sources of revenue that they have. And we put all 8 years on here. So you can kind of see some of the trends that are going on. You can see here in, where'd my little mouse go? Okay, you can see here in skating where you have COVID, there's a big missing gaping hole there. That didn't happen in the summer rec program. People were still willing to come and be part of this program, even though COVID was happening. It definitely decreased from years prior to that, and it's never really recuperated from that. In addition, the school started a program which has drastically decreased the number of people we have to be involved. And, some of this is just an order of magnitude. When you have half as many people, you can't have half as many staff because you just have to cover a certain number of areas. You can see kind of an uptake in the vending machines and concessions revenue both. And part of this concessions increase is some of the changes that were made as part of the EDA grant that Mandy ran through that was for recreational related things. Donations super variable, of course. The facility rentals, not a lot of variation from year to year, but definitely getting better in the last 2 years. This one, this rent for the resource center, the only reason that this is off is because they made 2 payments in 1 fiscal year. And so that will be probably 0 next year. And then rent for Little League is always $1,000, except, it's okay. Except when we were doing COVID, we didn't have a lease at all. And the first year we were back, the city let us do a half. And so that's what you can see down here on this little bump. But there are no programs that are big, huge money makers except skating, summer rec, and the fees that we collect from recreation and park rentals. So any questions?
Actually, yes. So if we brought back summer rec,
Mhm.
Will it be a profit driver?
Yeah, wherever you'd like to speak from.
And how is summer rec different from the summer camp?
Oh, yeah.
That is what it is. It's something.
Same, okay.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
So I think with summer rec, especially after COVID, I was an intern at the time, and one of my first or biggest projects was to get our summer camp going besides COVID still happening. So we were one of the first camps up here to get that approved COVID-19 plan, which I think made a huge difference during that time with the surge of how popular we were. The introduction of free camps, obviously, as the economy gets tighter, people are going to contract their wallets and look for the free options. We still had our loyal kids and families who, invested a lot of years or different siblings in Camp Perigo. So that's who we saw return. But as the economy continues to get tighter, loyalty only goes so far. And also a lot of those families are aging out. So I foresee this year, strategy-wise, I think was a good year to think about how we need to reapproach camp. But I think it definitely could be a good money driver. and looking at, I think it was year 2018 was the best year we did for camp, and looking at the resources, what did we do differently that year? And what could we maybe bring back or approach in a different mindset? And the partnerships as well. We used to have like the Rancheria pay for the lunches. We used to have people pay for field trips for the kids. And talking with Austin, that was a huge driver in having a successful summer camp. And
I know a lot of people, from what I'm hearing, would be happy to hear the consideration,
absolutely,
return that. There's a lot of disappointed people right now.
yeah.
I also know that there, you know, in other districts, a lot of local school districts are eating up the city-based programs.
Is that right?
So because they are getting outside funding to run those facilities for nothing.
Right.
And then so sometimes a partnership has been formed in some examples. Just information only.
Yeah, I'm hoping with the fee structure change, having some different camp options will let us approach that partnership angle in a variety of ways to find that solution. And definitely next year, looking at how can we have summer camp, Camp Perigo again, and look for outside funding, preferably to still let us be the drivers of running the program. But I've had people approach me with a lot of resources, obviously parents that are really passionate about bringing it back.
Okay.
Do we have any sense of the percentage of potential campers who are eligible versus non-eligible for the school camps?
We don't. I know with the reduced fee waiver, it became complicated because I think the school lunches became comp for all kids, which is a great thing. But then there was a hard to delineate who qualified for like the low income camp threshold. And school wise, I don't know what their marker is.
I spoke to the director at Blue Lake,
Mhm.
and she said it's free for everybody. So there is no income test to their program. It's grant funded. And I said, is there a limitation on the grant? And she said there's no foreseeable close in future.
So that's anyone who's eligible to go to school can go to camp.
And I know they're also looking at allowing people not just that go to Blue Lake School, but any kids that live in Lake this summer would be able to go.
They have to live in Blue Lake.
I don't know if they've
Oh.
stepped outside of that, but.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Emily? Emily, any more comments or?
Thank you all for reviewing this tonight. We'll get there.
Thanks.
So what these are slides that are breakdowns of this sheet that's on your table. And I just wanted to kind of use them as a summary of where we're at with each of these departments and whether or not there's a deficit or not. You can see that general government is obviously the largest deficit. That is where a pretty significant amount of housing element and planning costs associated with that are sitting. There's $130,000 basically between 25, 26 and 26, 27 of implementation of housing element 6 and also completion of housing element 7 with no end in sight of the implementation requirements that could be included in housing element 7. And I seriously doubt that the 35,000 I have sitting in there for housing element 6 is nearly enough. I mean, some of the estimates that I'm getting are well over $150,000 to do all the general plan amendments, all the zoning amendments. I mean, the length of time it's been since the land use and zoning general plan documents have been updated to the city are many decades. I mean, I think it's like 1986. And so the overhaul that it will take to bring that up to be compliant with current state law is going to be significant. It's almost like, do you question whether you just start over? Is that much? And so those are some hard discussions that I'm going to have with consultants, and I'm looking at whether to try to create an RFP to have people respond to, and then really get a feel for what different people, how would they go about dealing with those things. Because of the MOU, we have timelines associated with that are not flexible. it creates a situation where we have to try to figure out what we want to do with the sixth cycle before we really know what the outcome of the seventh cycle is going to be, where it really would be ideal if we could do both together, just for the economy of scale. Having a planner come in and look at this stuff twice is going to be more expensive than doing it all together. So as we work with HCD on this, and as we start to meet the milestones that are in the MOU, I'm hoping that we can kind of build a relationship with them where they know that we're willing to comply and we're going to take care of these things, and we have a track record of showing that we've done those things, so that maybe we can get a little bit of grace on some of these and get them to extend them so we can do them together. But that's kind of a future discussion with them, but it's definitely going to be in this next fiscal year for budgeting.
Can I ask
Go
a
ahead,
question about that?
please.
So you're talking about all these changes that have to happen in the general plan, but those are specific to what has been written into the housing element update. So we're not redoing the general plan, we're only amending parts and pieces according to what the housing element stipulates?
My understanding is that one of the things that ours is missing are objective development standards, and that applies to a lot of different sections. And so any section that has a regulation in it that prohibits or limits people's ability to do the things that are written into state housing laws, the priorities, those will all have to be edited.
So potentially is lots of parts.
Yes, although some of them are simply, we're just going to adopt whatever the state law is, like ADUs will be that way. We will not create our own ADU ordinance. We will just adopt whatever theirs is, and we'll say every time they update theirs, we're updating it with them, sort of a thing. But some of the other things, like just for an example, how we have things written for the maximum height of a building is going to be one of the things that has to be reconsidered and rewritten so that it is less arbitrary.
Any other questions for staff?
Okay. All right, and so you can see, public works, streets, sorry. Oh, it's okay. Most of these pretty much are netting out with the exception of planning, general government. I explained why legal is the way that it is, and then parks and recreation. The deficit this year is significantly less. Well, it's about the same. I wish it was significantly less than last year. It is being offset though by the $80,000 reimbursement that's below it. So that is also a recreation expenditure. All right, go ahead, Stan. Talk about our special funds. Almost all the special funds net each other out. You can see that it's a net positive. The AB 939 Solid Waste and Recycling Fund, that's $6,900 that in there can be spent for things like Green Waste Day. We have a lot less budget set up for Green Waste Days this year because we have the incinerator on site. And so we're really only paying one staff person to be there, and then they can go through and incinerate it as they have extra time. So that's part of the reason that one's positive and it hasn't been in the past. The CDBG will be positive every year because we don't have really any expenditures there. That is my best guess for interest. It assumes that no more than $2,000 in loans will be repaid this year. Like the business retention loan got paid off in full this fiscal year. And so, like I said, unless somebody passes or a house gets sold, we won't see any income from those programs. And then there's our water fund. The deficit is completely in operations, but we cannot use any of the numbers in any of the other groups to offset that. And then our sewer fund is just a little bit negative. So that's what's on your summary. And now I'm going to explain how unfunded liability for retirement works. Those are dental, vision, and trust. Those are kind of my list. Okay, so these are the projects that we currently think may happen this year that are not part of the budget in any form. The expenses nor the revenues are there. So we have been given money for phase 2 for the truck route. We have a construction phase grant set up with Cal OES through FEMA to be able to do the water tank. We're just waiting for them to release the plans for bid. The bike park construction would happen if we were to get a grant. The wastewater treatment plant expansion project is the one that is required under Housing Element 6. And the McClure property acquisition costs are also not included in here. So depending on what ends up happening with that, we either would make a pretty significant payment to her through the agreement that we have executed and is currently in escrow. We have only put in our earnest money at this point. We will then have to, of course, put the other $60,000 or $65,000 in, and that might be after the first of the fiscal year. Okay, go ahead, next one. So in summary, the general fund has an overall deficit of $93,000. So in that deficit is included $119,000 of unfunded liability payments to CalPERS in Department 180. The information that CalPERS sent me was not specific about what part is general fund, what part is water, what part is sewer. So today I had a conversation with our accountant from Jackson. And what he explained is that the way it gets divided out is 50% goes into the general fund and 25% goes into water and 25% goes into sewer. So what that means is that our general fund deficit is only $34,000. Our special funds still break even. The water fund, though, instead of being $64,000 to the negative, it's actually almost $95,000 to the negative. And the sewer operation fund, instead of only being $1,600 negative, it's actually $31,000 negative. So what I want you guys to understand, and I know this is bad news, we're just starting from here's where we're at, is all the functional cash deficits. So deficits that you don't have a way to be able to get other funding for is $160,000. That includes the general fund and the water operations fund and the sewer fund added together, because you cannot take money from any of the other funds to offset it. So even though the total is 91,000, it's really not.
So what's your strategy?
I know. It's a hard conversation of like, where do we go from here? This is what it was like last year too. And your problem is that you continue to do this year after year after year. You're burning through your reserve funds every year because you're adopting budgets that are negative and don't include actually all of the cash outflows because they don't reside in an expense account line item. There's been quite a number of loan payments and or unfunded liability that go through the liability account that you never see in your profit and loss statements because that's not where they show up. They show up on the balance sheet and your budget's never included all of them. This one does. So, this is a real picture of what your cash flow actually looks like. That is a really big number. I will say that Emily, would you turn the light on for me? 123,000 of that is directly related to the housing element stuff. And so, that's a one-time expense. You do that once every 8 years. It's not surprising that you would have to take money out of your reserves to be able to do that, where it's not something that you do every year. Ideally, every year you'd save a little bit towards it so that then when you had to make the expenditure, you were paying for it out of your savings account. But and I guess technically you are. You also have higher legal expenses than normal. You have $5,000 in AV equipment. And it's not good.
So when we talk about legal, to my recollection, several years previous, our budget for legal was 5,000 a year.
Yes.
Which was grossly under budgeted.
Yes.
I think from a realistic standpoint. So, so do you have any sense for us as to what would be a typical and appropriate budget for legal for a city of our size?
I would really hope that a city of your size would not have as many lawsuits as you currently have going. I do think that you're paying a lot more for legal than you ought to be because of the number of problems that you've had over the last couple of years and will continue to have on some of these things. The current budget for legal this year is almost $60,000, and last year's adopted budget, 25-26, was $37,000, but we've already spent $53,000 through the end of March. So we're going to be way over even the $37,000 budget.
Okay, so, but still, that doesn't really answer my question. I mean, a city of our size typically is going to have legal expenses. Like I noticed, I noticed Trinidad had a legal budget that was many, many times in excess of what our original budgeted amounts were.
You mean the 5,000?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I just,
Well,
I just
three hundred
get a sense.
an hour, that's $5,000 is less than 20 hours. I mean, you can't even have Russ come to a Ryan come to a meeting or review your agendas in that amount of time. I mean, part of the problem is, like, for example, the attorney that's helping us with the DDA, their rates went up to $495 starting July 1st from $325. I mean, that's a massive increase. And so that's part of the problem is the $5,000 that's being budgeted every year was based on very discounted rates from the Mitchell Law Firm. And those are going up as well.
Well,
I don't know what to tell you though about normal, because normal is so subjective to the nature of your employee relationships, your relationships with the public. I mean, you guys have a lot of things going on that attorneys are involved in that most cities aren't dealing with.
well, and wouldn't it be true that parts of those, or because, say, for example, the housing, that had been put off and delayed and not passed for a number of years. And so when you're trying to take care of all of that and have somebody looking over years worth of trying to catch it up, you are going to be paying more. Or if we didn't settle or get, the water tank and the land situation, and that's all being dealt with right now. Those are high expense items when it comes to attorneys, and they have to be taken care of. There's no way around that.
Well, ideally, you would avoid a situation where you were having to have your attorney negotiate with HCD to keep you out of court. I mean, adopting the housing element on time, which would have been back in 2019, that's ideal. And that's part of the reason you ended up in the situation you were in, is that we're having to do one right behind the other because the other one was 8 years late or 7 years late. And that's part of what Ryan's time was dealing with, was trying to keep you out of trouble. It's not normal, I don't think, to have your attorney be the person that's the main negotiator when you're doing property acquisition. That makes it quite expensive compared to having a consultant do it, that then gives you that separation that's ideal in those situations. So your attorney can give you advice as your general counsel, and the other consultant can give you advice for how the negotiations with the property owner is going. It drags your attorney into a relationship with the negotiations that doesn't make him as able to look at it objectively at the end. And so you had some pretty significant expenses associated with Ryan being your negotiator with the McClure property as well.
And again, that's been going on.
For years. Yes, for years. I think it really escalated though when Mrs. McClure passed, and then it became kind of more of a involved negotiation.
And that was in 2013.
Yes. Well, no, she didn't pass then.
Okay.
I don't think. I think it was more recent than that, like in the last 5 years.
Okay.
I don't know.
Council, I want to work on raising our hand or indicating, no, it's okay. Everyone's doing it. I want to work on you being called on to ask questions in the future.
Okay.
I'll work on that. Councilmember Louis Lusso.
I had a question about the CalPERS unfunded liability, the 11977. Has this peaked? Are we? Okay. What's the notation for that number?
The table if you really want to have a scary number. So what happens is
No.
so actuarials at CalPERS who are, specially set up to be able to guess how long people are going to live and things like that, right? They do a report every year that estimates what yours is going to be for a number of years going forward. And then it offers a number of payment plans where you can save money if you pay more earlier. So the sooner you pay it off, the less interest you're going to pay on it and the less variation you're going to have in it, because your actuarials aren't going to get a chance to keep estimating people living longer. The other thing that they consider in that is how the market's doing. And so they make a guess each year as to how well they think that their investments are going to do. And then at the end of the year, they use that information to readjust all the numbers. And then they put their hand out to every participant and say, okay, pay for the difference between what we guessed and what we actually got. And that's why it varies from year to year. The 119,000 that's there, you need to realize last year's was 104,000, not 53. 53 was only half of it. So like my understanding of how that passed through the books, because it was being placed into these liability accounts instead of in the expense accounts, I didn't understand why it was such a different number this year. And that's why I sat down with Scott, and that's why the numbers red. Those are all the ones I'm not totally sure about what they're going to be. So the next version will be adjusted, but we do pay them that amount. And if we pay it all in July, instead of paying a little bit every month during the fiscal year, we get basically a 3.5% discount. So we do that every year in July. We just move money out of our LAIF account to cover it. Because the discount's more than the interest we get.
Any other questions?
What is LAIF? The local agency investment fund or something like that. It's where we keep the millions of dollars that we have that would not otherwise be insured by a bank.
Additional questions? If it's okay, I'd like to go ahead and open this up for public comment really quick, just to, Julie, go ahead.
Testing the audio waters first.
You're good.
Awesome. I will say this evening, sorry I had to dine in ditch. There's always much going on. Graduation tonight for our 8th graders in town. I will say, Justin, the setup you have this evening, Terry, I can hear you very well. But to get into our item tonight, Jenny, I was writing down a lot of stuff when I was in there earlier as a preliminary, but actually you went into what I was wanting to get clarification on. Normally we're scrambling on this budget, actually towards like next week, the week after in retrospect. I'm usually doing setup at the fair trying to do this. So I'm actually feeling a little less stress relief this time, knowing that Jenny very thoroughly in her capacity prepared this budget presentation. Can I get one clarifying question though? Because within the agenda, it says discussion action items. Are we working towards a motion tonight to pass this budget, or is this a discussion?
Yeah, go ahead and answer that.
It's just intended to be a first draft discussion. Part of what I'm looking for is some direction from council about places
Okay.
they would like to see cuts. When it comes back, it'll come back with the narrative, it'll come back with the resolutions and the salary plans and all the pretty things that belong in it.
Thank you, Jenny, because I want to be structured with my comments in the right direction, given that. So thank you for the clarification, John. Given that we are still working on this, here's one thing I've noticed as a pattern is the deficit that we've incurred through negligence. I hate to be blunt, you guys, I'm just a blunt cowgirl, but I pay attention. I've been involved. I'm really concerned with the attorney, the planner, and the engineer. They precede a lot of prior management and councils. And in my opinion, you know, it's unfortunate that people want to poke sticks now and it's causing us to have more attorney fees in the moment. Where people weren't poking sticks in the back. And I'm sorry for that. Maybe I should have done what other people are doing now, but I just felt like, you know, if everybody just actually paid attention, they would come together and work for a common goal. And I still have that vision for all of us. So within our budgeting, honestly, we've got to start figuring out where we are been losing money over time with that. I think doing the RFP stuff is really great. Anytime we have a situation coming up, having that process. I agree, Jenny, for our general plan, we've got to just stick in there right away what the state's mandating. We really don't need to do the extra anything. That's what slowed the whole process down before, in my opinion. And then we do need a budget for that so we can move forward. That something's been stalled up. Now look at our state audits. You guys have nothing even to do with that. And look at the problems that we're still coming back with that. I hope we get them soon, but you guys had nothing to do with that either. So I just hate the stigma with the budget and the community. I'm just gonna use my moment here. But I think, thank you very much, Jenny, for this presentation. I watch all the rest of the municipalities, Del Norton, Trinity County included, and you did a really bombing job, sister. Thank you. And I look forward to it coming back.
Really?
Thanks, Julie.
Yeah, Justin, go ahead.
I would just like to clarify, the audio system tonight is thanks for Zoom is thanks to our city clerk. She did all of that on Zoom. So everything you guys are enjoying on Zoom is simply because of her. I take no credit for it.
You're so sweet.
Thank you, Justin. Any other public comment on the budget?
Clarifying explanation on that one is we are enjoying these benefits in partnership with Redwood Coast Energy Authority, who has helped us to set this up and loaned us some equipment so we can test it out and decide if we want to buy it. So thank you, RCEA.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the budget? Seeing none on Zoom, seeing none in the actual public, we'll bring it back to council for further discussion and questions for staff. Any other questions, or do you have any other presentation to give?
No, I think at this point, I'm mainly looking for some input as to, kind of direction. One of my questions is, how does council feel about choosing to draw out of our reserves to be able to complete the housing element and its implementation items? If we're talking about trying to balance the general fund with those large expenditures that are, like I said, 1 in 8 years, that's a really different picture than it is if we're willing to use our reserve funds to cover that and then plan for the next 7 years to put money back in to cover the next one.
Council?
I'm thinking about impactful action on the revenue side and how quickly we would be able, I mean, it's still going to take a long time to kind of build in some of that rather than cutting, looking at generating revenue, increasing those permit fees and water and a couple of other things, but yeah, I mean, do you have like a positive and you have a general feel about what we should be doing, I'm guessing, what your recommendation is, given the risks of what we have for.
In my opinion, and I'm a very conservative budgeter, I'll just start with that. Fiscally, I think that agencies need to balance their budget every year unless they have a really specific reason for why they're not. It's one thing to have a project or a specific thing that you're going to take money out of reserves for to be able to do something. And that's how I feel about the housing element. It doesn't bother me to bring $100,000 out of our reserve fund for the general fund and use it for the housing element. What bothers me is the water fund. We have year after year after year pulled money out of that operations account to the point where we have almost nothing. That's not okay. And I think that for me, my number one priority once we get the budget adopted is producing the paperwork that I can to at least get us to the place where the things that are simple to fix in the rate study are fixed immediately. Now, that is like a 5-month process to get through all of the Prop 218 noticing and the hearings.
Sorry.
But if I were to start July 1st, we could be there easily by January 1st. And I think that needs to be one of city council's highest priorities, is getting the water fund to a balanced budget. With the sewer fund, it's going to be a little more complicated because the loss of revenue is not because of an error in the rate study. It's because of a change in condition. And so that's more likely to require a complete rate study to be able to analyze that. That's probably not something I would be comfortable doing. The cost analysis is a very straightforward process. A full-blown rate study that includes capital improvement project. There's just so many pieces to it where you actually look at, in the next 20 years, how much do you need to be collecting to be able to recover your assets? I don't have the time to be able to put into that kind of an analysis, and it really would be best to have somebody on the outside do that. Those rate studies can cost, $20,000 probably. But it's well worth it if you can structure your rates to be able to bring in at least enough to not only cover your expenses, but prepare you for the fact that you have pumps that are wearing out and things that are in your lift stations that are old and they're not going to last forever.
Is there nothing in the existing rate study that addresses the deficit in sewer?
There was, and according to them, the way that they went about setting the rates were supposed to be a net surplus of, I think, $70,000 a year to replenish the revenue that was lost in that, but that's not what's happened. And I haven't delved into the sewer enough to speak with any confidence on what it would take to change in the rates to be able to bring us to a place where we were saving money instead of just barely scraping by. The water, I know what's wrong with it. Because
And isn't sewer operations, hasn't it been borrowing from other funds over time to?
Don't think so. I saw no evidence of that when I was running historical cash flow, like for the last 8 years as I looked through that stuff. I feel like it was borrowing it from itself, but I don't think it was taking money out of like general fund to be able to cover the shortfalls.
So is somewhere in this, and I apologize for not understanding this better, but somewhere in here, do we have the numbers that show what we have in reserves and all these different things?
So what you have in that summary sheet, and the one that I handed out that's highlighted is the updated version. The first column is the unaudited cash fund balances. These are cash only. Your actual fund balances include quite a number of other things like the assets that you own and what the liabilities are against them and how much depreciation. And so they would be slightly different than this. But I felt like in talking with you guys over the last few months that really the concern is the fact that the cash is what's flying out the door. So that's how I did it, was on a cash basis. So this first column is your unaudited cash fund balances. The next column is what you adopted for a budget and what I would estimate your cash fund balances to be at the end of this coming fiscal year. And then the next column is if you were to adopt the budget exactly as is, what your cash balances would be at the end of fiscal year 2027. So that'd be June 30th of 27. You can see like the sewer fund is a negative 234,000. It's negative now.
So this number on the bottom, the first column, 3.345, et cetera, that is our total cash fund balance at the end of last year. Yeah, last fiscal.
The beginning of this fiscal year, July 1st of this year.
And do you have a sense of where that number was? Like, I mean, because it's really hard for me to decide whether we should be taking money from this place if I have no idea how that is relative to where we've been in previous years.
And I could produce a table that had these exact same funds without the departments, and I could show you July 1st of each year what your balances were. I mean, that's an easy enough thing to do if that's something that'd be helpful to you.
I think it'd be helpful.
Okay. How far back do you want to go?
5, 10 years?
I think more than 5. I think you want to go 10.
Really?
We've been using 8 because we felt like that got us back far enough that we were well before COVID. So we could kind of see what COVID looked like, what looked like before COVID, what happened during COVID, and how have we recuperated.
I mean, if the numbers are easily available, 10 sounds like a nice round number. And will you be breaking it out into different?
So I would prefer to break them out by fund. You see, like on Fund 10, there's only one number there and there's nothing for departments because it's not separated by department. I would just, everywhere that you see a number in the left-hand column, there would be a balance that was associated with those.
And
Go ahead.
so that first column then is what those fund balances were as of July 1st of 2025, and then what we would be looking at.
Yes. And I did ask the accountant today, I know he has not finished all of the year-end entries for 24-25, and I asked him, how many of the entries are you going to make that might affect these numbers? And I know there are some that are related especially to funds 11, 12, and 13. where he's making adjustments to reflect where the expenses were posted that were reimbursed so that it offsets it. So some of these will get cleaned up a little bit as a beginning balance as well. But he said that he was super confident in the total and he didn't think that for like water or sewer, that those were going to change.
Additional questions?
Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just had one additional one. So if I'm looking at that first column, if it has parentheses around it, that's a negative.
Correct.
Okay, okay. And on that state park per capita program fund, and that fund 13 was the grant we got for Prash, is that correct?
It was for actually a number of different things. There was a variety of subsets that are in there. The $80,000 that's in this line item here for capital outlay, that is a reimbursement from them. That's for part of that $97,000 that's negative.
What was that again?
Here, up here, you see this $80,000 right there.
Okay,
That goes with this.
okay. So that's a reimbursement.
Yeah.
For that. Okay.
A note on that.
Sure.
We still have $102,000 to still be reimbursed by state parks.
So
We just don't have quite that many expenses.
We just don't have it yet.
Yeah.
And they did extend the grant period till December 2027, so it gave us a little more time.
Okay,
So that is a positive to look forward to.
okay.
Great.
And that was a state parks per capita grant?
State parks per capita, so far we've received, from what I can see in our accounting, 76,119. And we still have 102,000 to be reimbursed for that total of 178.
And all that money was spent quite a long time ago, correct?
Not all of it is spent to what I could see, but there may be some eligible expenditures that can be shifted, and I need to talk with Jenny and
Yeah.
Scott to see what would be eligible.
And we're trying to clean up 11, 12, and 13, because, you know, a lot of the things that were in there, some was Prash and then another was Prash, and they had different attributes of them. And we had kitchen work that was done under a USDA grant and then also under a state parks per capita grant. And so Emily and I've gone through all of them, every expense, to make sure that we have not requested reimbursement from two different agencies for the same expense. And then also to figure out which ones have we not requested reimbursement for, so that we can ask for it under the state parks per capita if it's eligible. And that's part of what Scott will help us transfer once we identify them.
So all of those expenses were paid out of general fund monies, and hopefully we're gonna be reimbursed.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think there's any hopefully about it. I think we will be reimbursed. It's just a matter of processing the paperwork.
Thank you.
And Emily, how much is left for the town square that we've expended but not gotten reimbursed for?
I have to check, I don't have it with me
Okay.
right now.
Because there's some there too.
So at one point you said that 80,000 was the town square, but that's not.
No,
No.
it's the state parks per capita that goes with Fund 13.
Might I remind y'all that it's 8 o'clock and I'm sure the attorneys are,
That's right. I'm
or
supposed to be
attorney
texting them.
is waiting for a closed session. I don't, not to rush you, but just,
Thank you.
we're talking about budget and
Yeah.
legal expenses, so.
Are we paying for them as they're waiting for us?
I'm supposed to be texting them as I go, so
Okay.
I'm on it.
I just.
I get distracted now.
So options we could do to offset the budget is defer the AV equipment purchase. Right now, we couldn't really postpone the audits, correct? Because we're almost done with them. Right.
Well, not only that, we cannot get a grant and or funding from a loan for matching funds for the tank right now because we don't have audits. I mean, not having audits isn't really an option. If you want to do anything.
I'm just going through all
Let's not-
this is going to be very unpopular. We could freeze the COLA but I know we've saved money elsewhere to hopefully increase, to keep that, but that's an option. We could look at, can we reduce Parks and Rec further at this point without, gravely affecting it? Emily, I guess that'd be a question for you.
Like to see how that grant with the state parks would play in, and if there's anything in an annual overview that could absorb too.
Great. We could reassess how much we're spending on planning. That would help. And we can work on mitigating our legal expense.
Mhm.
One of the places.
Go ahead.
that-
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jenny, and then I'll get Michelle.
One of the places that I have been thinking we might be able to cut for planning is that we currently offer 3 hours twice a month for people to come in and talk to the planners for free. And right now they're bringing 2 planners, which I don't understand. We don't necessarily need to offer that much. And we also have been allowing people that are doing a development project to come and use that time for free instead of it being included in the part they have to do cost recovery for. And I also was like, Gary, why are we doing that? I mean, if they have a development project and they've paid a deposit, we need to charge them for your time, not just give them free time. So I do think we could decrease the services. I mean, sometimes they're here for 3 hours and they only have 2 30-minute appointments.
We're being charged for 2 people for those 3 hours?
I believe so.
How is that? What's going on there? Okay. Lots of questions.
Yeah, lots of questions.
Michelle, go ahead.
I had a question about the mention of the Mondaway rent
Mhm.
revenue, and what, if that was gonna be able to be captured. I mean, it's not a significant,
It's a lot. They owe us $32,000 right now.
I mean, against, what we're looking at as far as,
Yeah, in
Revenue
addition,
generated.
there's $8,500 of legal expense in that fund because of the potential for needing to evict them. So it's not just what they owe us that we may not get paid. Not only that, for a number of years prior to that, the previous company that was in there declared bankruptcy. And so we wrote all that off, plus all the water sewer that they hadn't paid for years. And it's really been not a great property for us.
okay, so not a lot of hope.
The person that's in there, he is so sweet and I so want him to succeed. But I just think that the company was birthed by a person who had very specific skill set. And I think it takes that to be successful. And I just don't.
Okay.
The revenue is in there. It's in a fund by itself though. So it's not like it
Okay.
affects the general fund.
Councilman Renfrew, did you have a question?
Yeah, or maybe comments as much as questions. Back on well, it doesn't necessarily have to be there, but on the wage and salary scale, it was about this time last year that we had requested to also include the hourly rate for the engineer, the planner, and the attorney.
Oh,
It's just kind of like nice to know where those are at. And I think it's good for the public to see as well how quickly.
okay. Like in the budget narrative. It doesn't belong in the salary schedule. It can't go on there.
Well, yeah, I guess we used to have it with the building officials rate, I think had been on there, but now he's an employee. Wherever you have it, that it can be disclosed and readily available.
I'll put that in there somewhere. That schedule is used by CalPERS to establish how they do our retirement. And so they have to be employees that are on there, is my understanding.
Gotcha, yeah, that makes sense. And if I may,
Go ahead.
so Michelle, I appreciate your thought in, looking at the revenue side, not just the expense side. And we're in a tight spot, right? It's super tight spot. And I want to acknowledge first, Jenny, the incredible work and effort you've put into this. Not just for us as the ad hoc and the council, but for the public. There is so much information in this budget. I am so disappointed to see an empty room.
I know.
It was actually
Because also this is where we want to hear from the public on changes that we have to make. I mean, we can't keep our heads in the sand. I'm not going to pontificate for too long here, but I think that, there's no low hanging fruit that you haven't already pursued.
Right.
So on the revenue side, I'm actually suggesting maybe we need to get a grant writer that can pursue some of these. I don't know that the staff has a capacity given all of the other work you have to do. Also on the revenue side, and I think this is what you guys have been going after, are, the business license fee, the TOT, all of that money that's being left on the table. And that could end up being tens of thousands of dollars. But the situation that as I see, when we look at the majority of our revenue here, it's fairly static. Our property taxes, the motor vehicle in lieu, and sales taxes, those are all fairly static. And there's not any big push that we can make on those, and it's a matter of seeing where else we can backfill for that. Yeah.
Yes, Jenny, go ahead.
I was just gonna tell you, like, one of the things that I have put into place is a contract with the company that has done really minimal services for us in the past in reviewing our sales tax income. And so I went ahead and negotiated a single year contract to see what it would be like to pay them the $500. And then they have access to all of the information from the CDTA. And they will do an analysis of whether there are companies in your jurisdiction that aren't paying sales tax. They'll look at whether they're paying the right sales tax. Are you getting both halves of the 1% correctly? And all of that actually ties into how the calculation is done for the portion that goes into the county pool and then how that gets divided out. And so some of the places that we have never had anybody really keeping an eye on those things for us have the potential to kind of exponentially increase our sales tax. They get to keep like 15% of what they find. And I thought, well, that sounds fair. So we can try it for a year and see what it comes out at. And maybe we will end up with quite a bit more sales tax than we have in the past because they're monitoring it.
Okay. Good.
Yes, Terry, go ahead.
I have a question. You were talking about having the attorney negotiate and that in certain circumstances, and that maybe that's not the best way to do it. So if you hire somebody else to do that, what kind of difference would you be looking at as far as what, having not the attorney do it, but hiring someone else? What would be maybe the possible cost difference of that?
Well, one of the things that the firms that specialize in this do is they create a fixed fee contract. And so it includes all of the property appraisal services, all of the noticing, everything that it requires to be able to get through an entire process of doing an acquisition. And so you don't have a lot of unknowns. You don't have this is a difficult property owner, so we need more money from you. They just agree to do it. And it makes it to where you can really budget for that and it's not unending. And they just go through the process. They don't really have like an emotional attachment to the community. It's just different to deal with them than it is to have somebody who actually is involved in the city's business. Because they also don't have the same relationship with the council.
But physically, what would be?
Yeah, so the one that I did it was $16,000 to go through a process that ultimately ended up in a voluntary acquisition, but was very involved. Way less than we've paid Ryan.
Elise, did you have a question?
I did. I just wanted to mention that our sales tax has actually increased quite a lot over the last 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
We about 4 years ago, we were expecting something in the neighborhood of $30,000 a year, and we're up to $175,000. So that's pretty substantial.
Part of that's because they changed how the county's fund is split out. Like every time they change the rules on how sales tax work, it makes a really big difference to cities like us. And there's a bill out there where they're trying to make it where the state gets to keep more than what they have historically and take some of the cities. So
Right.
let's hope that doesn't pass.
Yeah. Because that's a huge chunk now.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a really big percentage. I was surprised too.
Councilmember Napier, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a comment and a thought for the whole council is, again, looking at the revenue side rather than just taking scissors as the only solution is, we're in this moment now and it took a long time to get here. But I also hope when we look at that revenue side, what can we be doing now to begin to develop long-term revenue streams? And what would those long-term revenue streams be that maybe the city has control over? So when I'm saying that as a revenue, but it is also going to be an expense I think we need to begin to consider now in order to get there. Thanks.
Councilmember Elise.
I had a thought, and you just reminded me, it had to do with the sewer treatment electricity, and if in the future we could consider some solar to offset. Of course, everybody's thought of that, but anyway, I just thought I would mention that.
It's harder as a city because, like people who own a piece of property, they get a tax break on it, but we actually just pay for it.
Right.
And it may still pencil out. There's companies that'll come out and do a study for us where you give them access to your PG&E information and they'll tell you what is your return on investment for the infrastructure.
Perfect.
And I don't necessarily want to rush us along, but if we are considering the cost of legal at this point, we do have the attorney waiting. If there's no further input to give to the city manager, I would just like to propose potentially receive some information from us. Could you come up with, and I know we're scraping at the bottom of the barrel at this point, maybe 2 or 3 different strategies? Or is it too late in the game for us to have you bring that forward? For us to optimize this budget or where we can cut?
I feel like the only strategies that are very practical for implementation on July 1st are all related to staffing.
Okay.
I mean, we've gone through every single line item and I've looked at what goes into the expenses that go into those line items. I mean, when you talk about a bottom up zero type budget, I mean, that really is where I'm at with this. I looked at a year's worth of expenses, every single one of them. There aren't a lot of things. I mean, there's little stuff. We could use Tensor less. We could make fewer copies. I mean, but they're really small in comparison with the big picture we have going here. So again, water and sewer clearly have a way they need to be dealt with. The general fund is more where I'm looking for, if we're okay with bringing back a budget that says we're going to pay for the housing element out of the reserve.
So we were needing direction on that tonight.
I mean, if I'm going to bring this back on the 24th, I have to have something ready to you on the 19th, which is next Friday.
And so the housing element is a have to have the thing.
You'll get it.
So it sounds like what we need to do is delve into the reserves.
So we need a motion, or do we just give you direction to bring the proposal for next meeting?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm looking for is whether you want me to make major cuts to any of the departments in the general fund in the next iteration that I bring back to you, which I'm hoping you're going to adopt on the 24th, along with all the resolutions and everything, so that we have a budget in place at the first of the year.
Is there any council member Scavani, Mayor Pro Tem?
Councilmember Napier mentioned grant writer. My understanding is that currently SHN is writing grants and managing grants. Is that
Natalie is, yeah, at SHN.
okay? And I don't know if that's a economical way to do that work or not. So I certainly am in favor of looking at some of these high cost contractors and dialing back the services they're providing and seeing if we have any other ways to acquire those same services or similar.
And I did take all of the quarterly reporting back from SHN, and I'm doing it myself for all the grants we have currently.
Okay.
Because I don't need Natalie to do it and send it to me to sign. I can do it myself.
Okay. And hopefully that's helping you get a better picture on.
It does.
Going on.
It really does.
Yeah.
Doing it yourself helps you to understand how the money's flowing and who's charging for what.
Additional input?
And any other planning or engineering services that are happening that we could dial back, at least temporarily?
Okay. I'll talk to Gary about the planning because I think we can dial it back.
Councilmember Napier?
I appreciate too that you feel strongly about a balanced budget, and I would hope that would be our goal. I mean, magic wand, I would hope that we could be putting in money for capital improvement projects, for a drainage study, for, levy assessment, for so many things. We did want to, the ad hoc and I, Terry and I, as part of the budget ad hoc, we're hoping that we could at least create a capital improvement fund or something to that effect, whether we're putting in $1, but something that acknowledges our need as a city to begin to prepare for that, matching funds, et cetera.
And I saw that question, and I guess my thought is that part of council's job is to decide of the reserve funds that we have, how should they be protected? And so taking the $773,000 in general fund that we're estimating we will have at the end of 2027, part of that process should be you guys deciding if there are portions of that should be set aside into places where they're protected for specific things. It's not that we're going to have a lot of extra revenue this year to put into a new reserve fund, but we can protect the funds we already have for things that you guys want to see happen eventually. And like you say, then you take a couple of years and save towards them, and then you do them. That's kind of what I would like to see you do, is not just leave this amount out there for anything that anybody might want to use it for in the future.
And may I follow up?
Yes, please.
Then would you be able to bring forward some recommendations and impacts on that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilman Fani?
And I know that for quite a while now, we've been just sort of trying to play catch up and try to leave space for staff to catch up and get us all on track. But like Kat mentioned, we do be more forward from an economic development standpoint and what resources or assets we may have that we can leverage for long-term revenue. So I'd like that to be one of our primary goals once we get past this budget adoption.
Are you thinking specifically property that we own or other?
Well, I'm contemplating the power plant site.
Yeah.
So yeah, property, because, I mean, that's what my knowledge base is looking
Right.
at. Yeah.
Yeah, and we own quite a bit of property. Thank you for your work.
Yeah.
If,
Councilmember Napier?
given what we've seen with budgets with Fortuna, with Rio Del, with Eureka, Arcata, and, it sounds like out of the general fund, staffing is the only place, that's really the only place to cut or reduce, or is that a recommendation at this point? Or is there a scenario that you would bring forward to the council that would show that impact?
It's my personal opinion, and that's all this is that the nature of the city would drastically change if we were to actually change the staffing that's in the general fund. And I'm not sure that we're to that point. If I was presenting $100,000 negative and it didn't include legal fees and it didn't include a housing element, I would be giving you different recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No further comments, questions? Do you have enough direction to proceed?
I think so.
Okay.
All right.
Righty,
Thank you, guys.
thank you. Moving on to
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Like, that was really
correspondence.
Okay. Do we have any? Do we have to talk about?
One, correspondence that I provided 2 copies with.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Future agenda item. Anything?
I just wanted to confirm that we are transitioning to a 2-meeting per month schedule in July and August. I laid out the schedule of what that is going to be on here. I wanted to verify that you guys are available on those days, or whether we need to change them to be special meeting dates that are something other than the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of the month.
I don't recall having decided that we are going to 2 meetings a month. Did we make that?
Yes.
So.
I believe so, yeah.
Talk about it so much, I just.
No, I
Decided to do like a 3-month trial or something and see how it went.
think that's what we decided.
Okay.
But I'm flexible.
Yeah,
We're just gonna try and smooth out our longer meetings and see if
Don't we have to amend the municipal code in order to do
No,
that?
she says to.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're supposed to be doing. I don't know when you went to one.
Okay.
All right.
I'm
I can
available.
imagine if there's a trial.
What was that first date?
So
14th.
I have no future agenda items to bring forward. Does anyone else have any future agenda items to bring forward?
But right now.
Public comment, Julie, go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, I want to concur with our manager Jenny. We actually did have facilitated 2 meetings per month, and then it just kind of fizzled out with the prior mayor and council. However, I do support as public facilitating the 2 meetings. So thank you for bringing that forward for the next few months. Elisa's comments prior and a lot during the budget, I think we could pull out a couple agenda items. I would leave it up to your guys' recommendation, but perhaps just reflect on everything we just talked about. I think there were some key pointers in there. Mine will be the RFP process. And the next would be plans for future development of city-owned properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. All right. There's no other future agenda items. We'll move on to the next item. Seeing none, moving on to closed session. Does the public wish to speak on any closed session items? Julie, go ahead.
Don't worry. at supervisors, they didn't have any comments on their budget but I was there for many other items as the sole commenter. But for this one, I just want to, first off, thank our council. You guys really took on a lot that really wasn't your burden to take on. But in the meantime, there is a timeline. There are, a lot of negligences that go back to, in my opinion, at the point of the process during these items, that the attorney, the planner, engineer, kind of threw our prior manager under the bus, and I did put that on public comment prior when we were discussing stuff about that. They knew the process was not being given to our city officials and our public in the proper manner. I really don't want to fight dirty. I love you guys because you really have good heads between your shoulders and you really always strive not to be that person. And I really commend all of you for that. But the timeline is the timeline. And if you just own that, because that is what it is already. It's already been spoken. It's already been done. And that is actually to your advantage, in my opinion, in your preceding closed sessions. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you all.
Thank you. Last call for public comments. Seeing none. All right, can we entertain a motion to proceed into closed session?
So moved.
Motion made by Councilmember Napier,
Okay.
seconded by Bayless. Councilmember Bayless. All those in favor of going into closed session, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We're going into closed session.